Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my video of how I painted On Time. This is a painting I did of Lake Galena at Peace Valley Park. It's based on a photograph by Jim Andrews, who does some beautiful photography work around the Bucks County area. I was so enchanted by his photograph, I asked him for permission to use it as an inspiration, and he agreed. As I looked at this beautiful, beautiful scene, I envisioned trying some new approaches to try to capture it in a unique way. I used several different experimental media, such as masking fluid, layering on paint, masking with paper, the use of powdered black tempera paint, which is then washed off, and then a second use of powdered black tempera paint in a different area. It was a complicated process, but maybe you'll find something you'd like to try. Let's paint. I began this painting by using masking fluid anywhere I wanted to preserve some strong color of a light note or some white. There were numerous white fluffy clouds in this painting, and I wanted to make sure they stayed white. What I'm doing here is using a wax candle to wax around the edges. This helps to keep my very wet paint from running off the paper and leaving the building, which is not my anticipated result. I want to keep the paint on the paper to achieve brilliant colors. Now I'm using a wide brush and wetting the whole paper down with water. After the water gets a chance to soak in for about 5 minutes or so, depending on the atmosphere and how wet it is in your area, then I'll begin using the paint. I'm trying to make sure that the water is applied evenly so it doesn't tend to pool up or puddle up as much. And now it's soaking in a bit. I'm going to begin with some Quin Gold, a beautiful intense color, because this is a sunset and I want it to be intense. I do tend to use my lightest bright colors first. This gold color was in the sky, but it was also reflected very heavily on the ground. The next color I'm using is Permanent Rose. Naturally, where the permanent rose overlaps some of the gold, it's going to turn to a lovely shade of peach or orange. My next color I used was cobalt blue, and then I used some quin violet. You're also seeing some Hooker's Green Dark going on and some sap green. And the sap green has been mixed with some burnt sienna to give it a more natural color. Now this is Vermilion. The trees against the sky were so brilliantly lit by the sky that they actually appeared in the photograph to be orange. So I am blocking them in where they're going to be. And since I plan to put more layers on top of this, a lot of it will be washed off. But I'm beginning it and giving it an initial layer. Of course, everywhere I paint over masking fluid, it's not even going to stick at all. But this is an experiment, and I'm trying to mark out what I want to try to do and show into composition. Whether it gets washed off or not, it will let me know exactly what I'm doing and the direction I'm heading in. This video had to be broken into 4 separate videos. And the reason was because it took so very long to try all these different experiments with this painting, with drying time needed between each one. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, but I knew I wanted to try some new things. So in part 1, we're seeing the basic layouts, and it's going to change a lot before it gets completed. I hope you'll stick around for the whole thing. I'm taking that same brilliant orange color and putting it into some reflections from the sunset onto the ground. I'm bringing in some quin violet into some of the orange areas, and it's making a lovely shade of mauve. I like that color. And I've used the same combination of colors to begin making the shadows and marking in the shadows of the trees. As you'll see, I'm going to be running water over this entire painting for the next steps that I follow. So I'm purposefully making the colors extra bright because the water will inevitably take some of the color off. So I'm ready to move on. And I'm using paper, normal construction paper, to block out the areas where I do not want my tempera paint to go. I'm going to start with a black powdered tempera paint onto the bottom half. So I'm blocking out the sky on up. With this powdered tempera paint, wherever I paint some water, the paint will not stick. So I can keep it from sticking doing that. But I also have masking fluid on the paper, and that's going to keep the black powdered tempera paint from sticking too. What this paint will do is add some extra texture and depth to my painting. So here you see me using my brush with plain water to paint over where I do not want the paint to stick. Those will be the areas that I want left light or white. I have to work fairly quickly because this water cannot dry. If it dries, then the black tempera paint will stick on everything. So I get the water down, and then I put the powder on, and then I wash the whole thing off. And here's where the paper blocking goes helpful, because I will not wash the top until I've done the same thing up there in a separate session. Sounds confusing, but you'll watch me do it. Here's the black powdered tempera paint, and I'm sprinkling it over that lower surface. If it was a nice day outside, I'd take it outside and use water to wash it off there. In this case, though, it was not a good day, so I took it to the sink in my larger art studio where I teach my classes. At the sink, getting some water ready to pour over this paper. Wash off the extra powder. Here I've poured a container of water over the entire paper. And you can see the mess in the sink with all that black powder in there. 1426 skip. I poured an additional set of water over to wash off the remaining paper. And here is how it appears on the table. Can you see all those black little textural features going on in the bottom half? I'm going to be doing the same thing to the top part now, trying to primarily pick up some textures around the trees. I don't need them in the skies. So I'll be putting a lot of water over the sky and trying to keep it isolated to mainly the tree areas. The paper, by the way, is dry now, except where I just painted that one tree line. So here I'm taking my clear water and painting over the sky and leaving some areas around the trees where I want the black powder to stick and add texture there. Now, when you're putting water on a painting that's already been painted, you do not want to belabor it and go back and forth 2,000 times, because you'll take all your paint off or blend it together in some unpleasant manner. So I just put down the water quickly, and now I'm going to sprinkle the black tempera paint around the tree areas only. And we'll see what it does. This is not an exact way to paint. This is rather inexact, actually. But when I washed it off, it stuck quite nicely and added some extra texture and depth around those trees. Adding layers like this to a painting can add a lot of depth. Also a lot of interest, because the surface seems to get richer and more detailed. Everything was dry, and my next step was to remove all of that liquid masking. And that took quite a while. I used my fingers to remove some by rubbing it. I used an eraser for a large part of it by erasing over it. If you have a good technique that works for you, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Seriously, take a moment and tell me how you get this stuff off quickly and easily, because it takes me so long to do it. There's the sun coming out, and now I'm taking off all the liquid masking from those white fluffy clouds all through the sky. And yeah, it's taking off the masking, and it's also taking off the black powdered tempera paint where the clouds were going through the trees. So that may have been a bit of a waste of time. But when you're experimenting, you waste time sometimes. Sometime later, I have most of the masking off. And I'm going over the entire surface and using a big paintbrush to brush off the remainder of the erasures. One of the bad parts about using masking, if you want to convey a soft edge, masking is generally going to give you a hard edge when you remove it. If you've done just a little masking, then taking a nice firm brush and brushing over those edges will quickly soften them. But if a great deal of your painting has hard edges that you want to soften, like in this case, white fluffy clouds, then you're going to be at softening for a while. And that is exactly what happened for most of the rest of this video. One by one, edge by edge, I softened those white fluffy clouds. Now how I'm softening, in case you can't quite tell, is I'm using a firm brush, and I've dampened the brush with water. I'm going along the edge, and I am removing the hard edge and making it into a soft edge by rubbing it with my firm brush. And each cloud edge is slowly softening and losing that hard edge because I want the clouds to be very soft. I have to continually wet the brush again, and I have to blot the paper occasionally with a paper towel to take off the extra paint. The cloud formations in this case have many soft little puffs floating in the blue sky with the bright colors of the sunset going down further below. All these little puffs had to look like clouds floating in the sky and not like a hard-edged white line. And I wanted this sky to be as beautiful as could be. Sometime later, I'm stopping by and you can see that I've softened the clouds about halfway down the sky. At this point, I've decided to add a little bit more turquoise color to some of the sky. And I like it. But I have more clouds to soften. So better get back to it. When you're working with blue, turquoise, and yellow, by the way, you sort of have to watch what you're doing to avoid making green if you don't want greens. Unfortunately, in this sky, there was awesome shades of turquoise, even going to a teal. So I did want to have these greenish tones in the sky, where it went down closer to the horizon and began to mix with the yellow and the blue. I'm also bringing in some more cadmium yellow to brighten my tones. And you can see the clouds are getting much softer looking at the top of the painting anyway. I'm getting into the middle of the sky now. I've gone over all of my edges in the middle area with a damp brush prior to going back and using the stiffer bristled brush to scrub at the edges. That seems to be working fairly well at softening. It's taking a lot of patience, but at the same time, if you love to paint, you have the patience with your painting if you're trying to achieve a goal and you have it in mind. And my goal was to make a sky as beautiful as the one that was photographed by Jim Andrews at Lake Galena. And it was going to take some work, because who can come close to matching Mother Nature? But as I see the edges soften, I feel rewarded. With the edges softened and a little bit damp, I'm going back in with some color. And I'm painting the more subtle tonalities that are going through the clouds and around them. I'm also going back through the areas of the trees that were totally blocked out by masking fluid. So the sky appears continuous and cohesive and not broken up by white blocked out areas. And now back to softening one last area of the sky. Having softened that last area, I'm going back and adding a little bit more color where the color was removed or washed off. I've also added some dark clouds at the lower part to contrast with the lighter colors and the pastel shades. Here I'm kicking up that brilliant turquoise color again as well. And I'm filling around the masked off areas of the trees. And it's been a lot of work, but I'm very pleased to see the sky. It's starting to look the way I want it to look. And it's so impossibly complicated that I'm pretty thrilled at this point that I've come close to pulling it off. Did you ever feel like that? Wow, I actually managed to accomplish what I was trying to do. When you're painting something, it's pretty exciting. I've learned some things throughout this painting process of what I think will work and also what I think I really don't want to try to do again. Maybe find some other ways to convey things to avoid some of that extra work. But at the same time, I see what I can do with the masking fluid and with the powdered tempera paint and the masking and blocking off, and how to enrich the surface and the textures of a watercolor painting, which is something that I continue to want to explore with my artwork. There's always something to learn or something new to try. The sky is just about the way I want it, and I'm ready to move on to the next part of the painting. I hope you enjoyed watching my video called On Time. I sure did a lot of experimenting in this video, and you saw a lot of different processes being tried. Some of them were successful, and some of them made things a little hard for myself. Well, give my video a thumbs up if you liked it, and ring the bell, and I hope that you'll subscribe so you don't miss the next one and see how I completed this painting. In fact, if you subscribe, you won't miss any coming videos. There's some links below you can check out to different products that I use, different products that I create, my blog, my Facebook art page. So check them out if you get a chance and leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.